Welcome to the newest episode of the Enrollment Clinic. Today, my guest is James Steen. He is the VP of Enrollment, Admissions, and Marketing at Houston Christian University. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you here. I think we're going to have a very interesting discussion. I mean, HCU is one of those interesting universities where it's a bit of a mid-size institution,
hmm
but it has the shadow of a very, very large institution. There's
Yeah.
so many things intersecting there. It's the fact that 60 of the student body, it's online, so it intersects
Mhm.
with that type of section of the industry, right? The other part is that it is a Hispanic serving institution. So that's
hmm
another intersection there. The other thing, it's growing in a space where faith-based institutions are actually declining. And I think you have some very aggressive goals for the next 5 years. So I can't wait to jump into it. But first, you have almost 2 decades of experience at
hmm
HCU and also in higher education prior to that. I'd love to hear from you. What are
Yeah,
some of the things, some of the major changes you've seen in the admissions, enrollment, marketing space in higher ed?
absolutely. Well, I've seen quite a few, and I'll confess I've been doing this for 33 years. I started at Baylor University June 1 of 1993, right after I graduated. And you don't grow up choosing to jump into admissions and enrollment, right? You kind of just fall into it. I was a student tour guide and loved visiting with parents and families who were trying to make those ever important decisions about where to go to school. And when I was graduating, I knew the admissions office was hiring, and so I thought I would go apply to be an admissions counselor and do that for a few years and go get a real job. And 33 years later, here I am. But back in that day, we were just visiting about student search and how different that is these days. I remember being a first year admissions counselor, and director came to me with this huge stack of papers in this file folder and put it on my desk and said, I
Mhm.
want you to be responsible for student search. And I said, what's student search, right? And it was literally bubbling in all your request forms and this zip code range and bubbling in high schools that you wanted to buy names from, whether it was College Board or ACT or whatever. And we've come a long way since then. But in a lot of ways, it's still all about building relationships. As much as we try to leverage technology and virtual tours and SEO, and now these days it's AEO and GEO,
Mhm.
and we're using AI and leveraging CRMs and all the different things that we're doing. I mean, literally, when I started, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't really even have the internet, right? That wasn't even a thing back in the early 90s. So again, we are using all of those tools. We're leveraging all those things very, very differently these days. But it's definitely all about building relationships. If we can't do that, we're not going to be successful.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. And I hadn't thought about the fact that going that far, the absence of the internet and how that
Mhm.
behavior of finding the right institution, enrolling and attending has definitely changed. One of these changes, especially nowadays, and I think it's big, and I know that you're big into it, is direct admissions. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on
Yeah.
direct admissions.
Well, and that harkens back to we used to have something. I guess Royal and Company piloted this thing called a fast app. And so back in the day, it was how do we make the application process as smooth or as easy or as seamless as we possibly can, and basically remove barriers to entry. And I'm a big barrier buster, and
Mm,
man, in conferences and sessions that I present, I often get on my soapbox about application fees. And why do we really need an application fee if we're about to charge a student $40,000? What is a $40 application fee? What does that really matter, right? And again, I know there's good reasons to do all those things. Or when I came here, it was Houston Baptist University at the time. We've since changed the name. That's a whole nother interesting conversation we could have at some point. But literally, there were multiple letters of recommendation and two essays and an applicant, and it was like, guys, why are we doing this? What we don't have to have all of those things to make a decision, right? If we know they're academically qualified, if we know that they are going to be able to be successful here at the institution, why do we need them to jump through all these other hoops and all these other things? And so we streamline the process and we've made it easier every year. And so now this whole idea of direct admission is literally flipping the script to
Mm,
say, you know, I know you're admissible based on your high school GPA. I know you're going to be admissible based on whatever other interest or major that you have here. So why wouldn't we go ahead and make you an offer to say, hey, congratulations. Not only are you admissible, but we're going to guarantee you an XYZ scholarship based on your GPA. Now, we still have to have all of that information, but we're making the offer up front. And then we say, if you're interested, click on this link to learn more and fill out this onboarding form. And what is the onboarding form? Well, it's a literal, basically streamlined application, right? And then we still get an official high school transcript and quite honestly, the Common App and the Common App direct admit process has made that
mm.
process even easier because those applications often come with an official high school transcript. So I mean, so we're doing things quicker, faster. We're making offers up front, but the students still have to go through all the same steps. We're just kind of flipping the script and doing some of those things on the back end versus making them do everything on the front end for the same results.
Yeah, so it's in a way, it's basically just turning the funnel upside down, right? So you
Absolutely,
start with
absolutely.
admission, and then you get all that information and streamline it back. One of the things that I've noticed with direct admissions, and it's one of the main complaints, is that the yield
Mhm.
just goes down drastically, right? So it seems to me like you would need a different type of contacts, a
Sure,
different type of
sure.
communication to a direct admit student. What does it take, in your opinion, to get somebody to actually show up in class
Mhm.
in August when they've gone through that direct admission
Yeah, no,
process?
that's a fair assessment is that you're going to have significantly lower yield rates from those students who came through a direct admit process. But here again, it's a numbers game, right? If
Yeah.
if if I'm trying to grow enrollment or if I'm trying to get in front of more students and I can do that with a direct admit offer. And maybe instead of yielding, I have a lower yield rate already, but instead of yielding 12% of my, normal admits from my other applications, maybe I only yield 6 or 7%, half as many. I'm still getting in front of that whole group of admits that I wouldn't have been able to get in front of otherwise. So for example, we obviously use the Common App is one of our main application sources, and now we're doing Common App Direct Admit, and so I'm yielding at a lower percentage, but I'm still enrolling more students
Mm,
because that application allows me to get in front of more students. So it's a little counterintuitive. It's would you rather enroll more and yield less? And for me, the short answer to that question is yes, absolutely. I'm happy to get a lower yield rate. I can plan for that. I can budget for that. I know if I'm trying to, hit an enrollment goal, I'm on the hook budget wise, right?
yeah,
This fall
yeah,
for 1,200 for 1,200 freshmen. So I know that okay, I if I've got this many admits and they're going to yield at this rate. I mean, I can plan for that.
yeah,
What I can't plan for is, those direct admits that they yield a little bit lower, they're softer applications, so maybe we just shouldn't do it. Well, no, I'm still enrolling students and they're retaining, right? So that's the main thing. I think there are definitely those within higher ed that are blessed. And I say that very affectionate, that are blessed with the opportunity to manage enrollment with, stricter top of the funnel strategies or wait lists, right, at the
mm,
admin stage. And great, good. If you've got that much demand, that you're managing your funnel with being more restrictive and trying to minimize applications because you have that much demand, or push out, offers to those on the wait list to get to that right number when it's all said and done. That's a different kind of enrollment management than those of us, quite frankly, smaller privates, even smaller regional publics who are at the bottom of the food chain, right? It's an 80
Yeah,
20
yeah.
rule. 20% of institutions have, national big brands, strong academic relationships, or, elite flagship institutions. And then there's the rest of us at the bottom of the food chain
Mm,
that are always competing with those that have bigger brands, bigger academic reputations.
yeah.
And quite frankly, for those of us in private education, cost significantly less than we do. So we have to work harder sometimes and to get those students enrolled who might not otherwise enroll because they didn't even know it was an option. I think these strategies like direct admit are really paying off.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hearing two things. One is realignment of KPIs, right? So
Mm.
this
Yeah,
idea of we need to maintain the same yield just doesn't make sense, right? Because you're kind of missing the forest for the trees, right? So I think
absolutely.
that's the expression. And then
Yeah.
the other thing I'm hearing is using direct admit almost as a form of marketing and advertising, right? Like
Yeah.
getting your name in front of a group of people who have never heard of you, and now you're
Absolutely.
interrupting their kind of enrollment funnel, or like their
Yes.
awareness
Yeah.
to application funnel because they hadn't considered you. Now you're getting right in between that process and saying, "Hey, look, you're admitted here. You can stop now." Right? Like you can
Yes.
stop your
Yes.
search now. That kind of brings me to a good segue to the next topic, because you to the KPI topic, which is you manage two different teams, right? You manage your
Mhm.
admissions team that has their own set of goals and KPIs, and then you
Correct.
manage the marketing team that has its own set of goals and KPIs, and they don't necessarily align, right? Admissions
Correct.
is semester, 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 semester. Marketing is let's do this today. We're going to see the results
Mm,
3 years down the road, right? So how
right.
do you, from a top line perspective, how do you ensure that marketing and admissions are kind of working in sync, even though their
Mhm.
goals are, one is short term tactical, the other one is more long term, right?
That's great. Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, I think it is. It's much easier to measure the metrics, the KPIs, just for enrollment management because it's just so upfront and apparent and in your face. And I mean, I'm a big funnel guy. In fact, as the VP for enrollment management and marketing, I push the funnel out every single day to a huge distribution list here on campus, vendors, et cetera, because it matters. The funnel
Mhm.
matters. So those metrics go to all the marketing team members. But then we also have the KPIs and the metrics and the clicks and the visits and the impressions and all those things that don't necessarily translate to apps, admits, and enrollees, right? But we still have those metrics that we share with the rest of those, outside of marketing, including my admissions team, to say, okay, look, here's how we're moving the needle in terms of searches and clicks and the digital ads that we're doing, and this is how they're performing. Or we piloted this those the digital billboards kind of may not be the best way to describe them, but next grad they have the almost like, they're like digital billboards in
Mhm.
specifically in high schools. So we had a special URL for that, right? And we're measuring impressions based on those things. So again, it's a different way to measure, but at the same time, I need the marketing team to understand what admissions is doing, and then I need everybody else to understand how what we're doing in marketing is ultimately driving eyeballs to the website,
Mm.
or driving clicks, to whatever academic program or whatever specific population that we're trying to recruit, right? We've got the ability to see a little bit of that overlap, but we got to make sure everybody understands what everybody's doing at the process in those various processes.
I want to jump a little bit to the topic of faith-based institutions. I find that very interesting, and we're we're in a very interesting past, 5, 6 years
Mhm.
specifically on with faith-based institutions, because we see a lot of them
Yep.
closing down specifically. And I'm not sure if this is just happening with this group, the Catholic affiliated
Yeah.
universities, right? And it's interesting to me because we're at a time where we see statistics where actually the younger population, the Gen
Sure.
Zs and now Gen Alpha are
Yes.
actually they're more curious about faith, and religion. There's obviously been an increase in the number of people converting to Catholicism,
Mhm.
Greek Orthodoxism, or just Orthodoxism in general. Some of the Protestant churches as well, and I can't seem to kind of add up, the fact that these institutions are closing down or having to merge
Yeah.
to stay
Yeah.
alive, while there's now more interest in kind of faith-based institutions,
Yes,
right? That
absolutely.
makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, and honestly, I would say from a faith-based institutional perspective, those institutions that are very clear about their mission, or you could argue those that are really trying to double down on, we are unapologetically Catholic or we're unapologetically a Christian institution. I think those are the ones who are having more success than those who are saying, well, we're historically Baptist or we're historically Catholic or Methodist or whatever. I think when you aren't clear about who you are and what your mission is, you just kind of start to look and feel like everybody else.
Mm,
and
mm,
and there's so many other options out there. If you're not going to be intentional about your distinctively Christian mission, then I think you're just not going to be as relevant,
mm,
frankly. And so in my experience, we have to be unapologetically a Christian institution. Now, at our institution at Houston Christian University, you don't have to necessarily be a Christian to come here. And when I survey students, I have this interesting kind of split where about 25% of the students who enroll here say, "Oh no, I came here because you're a Christian university." There's a bottom 25% that say, "Oh no, I could have cared less that you're a Christian institution. I came here because of whatever major or whatever." And then there's just the middle 50% that say, I didn't necessarily come here because you're a Christian university,
mhm.
but I really value the fact that you're a Christian university, and that's an enhancement factor to my decision to come there, right? So everybody may come with slightly different motivations, but bottom line, every faculty, every staff member is a professing Christian and is very, very clear about their faith. And you have to be a Christian to work at Houston Christian University. So in that sense, we're very, very intentional, not only about academics and the programs and all the things, and we've started a lot of new programs here recently, but we're also very intentional about hiring and communicating who we are with prospective students. So they're hopefully they're not surprised when they get here that we're a Christian university, right?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, all the universities that I've attended or that I've worked at or worked with have been secular universities. I'm curious, how do you convey that, to a regular student? So if I'm attending HCU, right? Besides the fact, let's say I'm part of that group that it doesn't matter to me what kind of your faith-based
Yeah.
alignment is. I think this is a great institution. I want to attend here. How do I get that in my everyday, interaction with the class or the school, with the how does that come across, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of our students are going to attend. It's not, we don't call it chapel; it's called convocation. So every student is going to attend convocation, and most of those are going to open with with worship and have a speaker that is probably biblically based and communicating something along a spiritual message. However, we'll have outside groups that just come in and perform, or we have an honors convocation, we have a back to school convocation. I mean, there's other convocations, right, that are a homecoming, one for homecoming. So again, there's different things that we're doing. Every student's going to take at least 6 hours or two classes of Christianity courses. And then we have a lot of students that want to take extra courses or
Mhm.
do more of those things. There's a lot of clubs and organizations that are spiritually focused, but not all of them are. A lot of them are more focused on, academics, or, I'm going to be an engineering major, so I'm going to be a part of this engineering club, right? So again, we're just like every other institution in that sense, but as a Christian institution, they're gonna realize, these convocations and Christianity courses are definitely something that are going to be a little more on the distinct side.
Yeah, I think that's very important, kind of living your brand, living your mission, and
Absolutely.
really, not just doing lip service to who you are, but actually, showing
Absolutely.
to your customers, right? Like
Yes.
who the brand is. And I think it's interesting because the more research you look, whether it's EAB or NL on
Mhm.
the recent grads, there's this search for meaning, right? There's this search
Absolutely.
for some grounding, especially now where with social media, truth can be here, but can be over here as well, can be up here as well, and you just
Mhm.
want some grounding. And I feel like there's definitely a mission to be served by faith-based universities.
Yeah, and I think that is a really, really good point that, you know, at a quote unquote public or maybe secular institution, you may not be able to talk about your faith and how it informs your academic discipline or your interest in this topic or that topic. And it's the type of thing that as a Christian institution, we can talk about all of those things, right? Not only how, your academic interest or your future goals or that credential that you're pursuing in whatever major is going to affect you academically or professionally or socially, but we can also talk about how it's impacting you spiritually, right? So it's almost like we get to talk about everything, whereas there's some things that are not necessarily okay to talk about at some public or maybe secular institutions.
No, no, it's definitely an interesting area. What do you think? Just kind of looking ahead, 5 years from now, and especially with the demographic decline,
Absolutely.
do you kind of see this trend of faith based institutions that still closing down, or is there a place where it flattens out or even grows?
I think it does. I mean, and I'm a big proponent of Christian higher ed. It's why I do what I do. I do some consulting on the side, and I've worked with a lot of Christian institutions. And I think there is a need and a niche for that. I think there's a need for Catholic higher education. I mean, I think there's a niche and a need for all of us. I just, as I said earlier, I think when you start to kind of get away from that mission, that purpose, that passion, that calling, if you will, and you just kind of start to water everything down, you just become a lot less relevant. So are Christian universities going to grow and take over the world? No, absolutely not. It's work, right? And these days, flat is the new up, right? So
Yeah.
so even if you can just kind of maintain enrollment, I think that's a win for a lot of us these days. And it's unique because obviously we're in a situation that as an institution that is trying to grow, it helps a lot that we're in Houston, Texas, right? So I
Well,
even tell this to some of my friends and colleagues at other institutions. If you're in rural wherever and you're trying to grow or establish some new direct admit strategy or whatever the strategy is, it's going to be harder to do that when you don't have 7 or 8 million people right here in your backyard. I mean, we're blessed with the fact that we're in a huge, major, growing city, and so not everybody can experience the type of growth that we've had. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try new things. We shouldn't be piloting and trying to get into new markets and get in front of other institutions, or rather other prospective students, to help our institutions grow and maintain a healthy funnel, right?
yeah, I think, and there's there's a lot of research done on this. There's a big marketing institute, Ehrenberg Institute in Australia, that's done a lot of research on this. That the way to grow is not being niche, but actually trying to reach as wide of a market
Yeah,
as possible with your message, even if
sure.
those people may not align with your message as well. That's where growth is.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I think also is a little bit in your favor, I would say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is the fact that, Houston is one of the top 3 largest demographics for the Hispanic,
Yes,
population there, right?
yes.
And and you guys are a Hispanic, serving institution, which is a federal designation. It's not, just
Mhm.
a kind of a word in and of
Right.
itself. And a lot of them do come with very faith-based grounding, right? When
Absolutely.
they come here, so that helps. Now, how does that, from a communication standpoint, kind of making sure that you don't get pigeonholed into an institution that serves a certain subset of a population, right? Like the
Mhm.
Hispanic population. How do you ensure that message, that of that overarching message to what's the right word I'm looking for? Kind of the mass message, if
Sure.
you will,
Yeah.
resonates.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question because, obviously we're majority Hispanic and because we're in Texas, that makes a lot of sense. So, my incoming freshman class will probably be anywhere from 45 to 50% Hispanic. And then next we're probably 25%, maybe approaching even 30% black. And then my white population is only like 15 to 20%, right? My
Yeah.
Asian population is about 10%. So we're a really, really, really diverse. We don't look like what you would stereotypically think of as a Christian university, right? Which is very white. That's just not who we are. But it's also a reflection of Houston and where we are. We were originally, when I came here 20 years ago, Houston Baptist University. And what we realized is, Baptist is not necessarily a growing pond. It's kind of a shrinking pond, right? But the vast majority of our students who are Christians, it was just becoming more apparent. We're a Christian university, right? We're not just a Baptist university. We're a Christian university. So it was more reflective of who we are. And so Baptists, yes, are a huge percentage of my population. I'm right at about 20%. My non-denominational is usually next at right around 20%. And then Catholic is my second or third largest,
Yeah.
denomination represented, which wouldn't surprise you if the majority of my students are Hispanic, right? So in that sense, we're a Christian university. We're serving all of those different populations. And we do a beautiful Ash Wednesday celebration, right? That the Catholic Student Ministries team lead. I mean, like we partner with and we want to include all of our students and hopefully make them feel like, hey, I can be a Catholic at Houston Christian University and still thrive, right? Those Christianity courses are just as applicable to me as they would be to a Baptist or a Methodist, right? So again, I think in that sense, we can't be all things to everyone. We have to be true to who we are. But at the same time, as a quote unquote Christian university, we're serving all of these student populations and hopefully we're serving them well.
Yeah. And do you, I mean, would you consider yourself like a very, very regional university, or your
We are.
reach is wide?
Yeah, we're predominantly Houston. So I say, I tell people we're a very regional institution in that sense. So it's not quite 80%, but it's like 75 to 80% of my undergraduates. So out of about 3,500 traditional on ground in person students, you know, almost 80%, about 76, 77, 78% are
Mm,
going to be from Houston metro area. Now, when we say Houston metro, that's a pretty wide. I mean, Houston's massive, right? So I mean, like you can drive an hour north and we still consider it Houston metro, but it's probably still too far away for you to
yeah.
commute back and forth to campus every day.
Yeah.
But the majority of my students are commuters. So that even creates a little bit of a different vibe as well, right?
Right. And how does that breakdown look from an online student perspective, right? Given that
Yes.
60% of your student body is online, And
Yes.
how does that mirror? And there's a research that basically says that roughly about 70 to 80% of your online student body lives within 100 miles of your campus anyway.
And that's 100% true for us as
Okay.
well. I mean, because of we got about 2,000 plus online students at any given point in time. And again, they're more grad students than they are undergrad, but they're, non-traditional students or adult learners. And they're from, I think they represent about 46 states, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just Texas, but the vast majority of even our online student population are within about 100 to 150-mile radius of
Yeah.
campus.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting that he kind of mirrors
Yeah,
that. As we're kind of approaching the end of this discussion, I want to talk a little bit about, the changing nature of the workforce and the skills of the workforce needs, right? And I know that you continuously launch new
yeah,
programs now and I know that AI is a big topic everybody's talking about, whether it's going to replace jobs or it's not going to
yes,
replace jobs. My feeling is it already has replaced and it's going to be downhill from now. But
yeah,
what's your thought in terms of when you're coming up for new programs, right? It's a fair question for a prospective student to ask, will this degree even be around when I graduate in
correct,
6 years?
correct.
Because 65% of people actually graduate in 6 years, not four. So how do you ensure that what you're coming up with as a product has longevity and will pay off 20 years from now, right? Not just in the next 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's really the main question that we all should be asking ourselves because obviously things are changing so fast. Thankfully, we started engineering about 8 or 9 years ago, and we launched one of the programs we launched was cyber engineering.
Mhm.
And we're the only, ABET accredited cyber engineering major in Texas. And again, it's a smaller program. Like we started with cyber engineering, computer science, and electrical engineering. Electrical engineering, far and away, is the biggest of those three. But since then, we've added some other programs. We also had a very generous donor who served on our advisory board for the School of Engineering. And basically he sold his company. He challenged us, what would it take to double engineering? And so, I had a conversation with the president and we said, well, if we could gross everybody up to full tuition, that would certainly help. And the donor
Yeah.
said, great, let's do it. So we went from 90 new incoming freshmen and transfers the year prior to 209 that next year. And he was so excited. He said, hey, let's do it again. And then if you do it again, I'll help you do it a third time. And we're like, okay. So we went from then 209 to 375. We're not going to go from 375 to 750 this fall, obviously, but we are continuing to grow, and it's allowed us to now start mechanical engineering in fall of 27.
Right.
We also recently just announced we're going to have a Bachelor of Science in Artificial Intelligence or AI
Yeah.
starting in 27. And so again, it's allowed us to do some really creative things and move even faster because of the generosity of this incredible donor who, mind you, is still, paying that gap for all these engineering students who are going through the process. I mean, you've got to have a specific, GPA and you've got to maintain that GPA. But for those who are in the program, it's been a phenomenal success and it's been a huge part of our growth. But obviously, since then we've started we added cybersecurity to the mix. We've added electrical engineering technology. We've added information systems, right? So we kind of have this now rather large portfolio of other majors
Mm.
that have really, really helped us grow in the College of Science and Engineering in a pretty phenomenal way.
Yeah, and I think, and we had talked in a previous discussion that the role of the accreditor and having them move fast with
Absolutely.
these things is very important as well. This has been a great conversation. It's great to have you here. I have one last question that I'd like to ask everybody. What's one thing in our industry that either we're not talking about or we're not talking enough about?
Huh, it's an interesting question. I mean, you alluded to it earlier. I think, Gen Alpha's coming and will be enrolling at our institutions. We're already kind of recruiting them. they'll be enrolling within the next couple of years. Obviously, everybody is talking about the demographic cliff, but I also think there's a place, there's a market for those who are hopefully being responsive, and maybe we're not talking about it enough, but if we're not nimble enough to pivot to add majors, AI being one of the I mean, if we're able, I think, to be responsive to the incredible speed at which all of this new technology, specifically artificial intelligence, is moving. I mean, they're building data centers. I mean, even
Yeah,
all over the state of Texas, there's data centers. They're building them everywhere, and that's gonna create jobs, right?
yeah,
The jobs may be a little bit different, but we have to be responsive enough to say, okay, where is the market going? Or you look at oil and gas. We're in Houston, Texas. I mean, oil and gas may look a little different in 5, 10 years. What are we doing to be responsive to that and not just do the same thing that we've always done? If we're doing the same thing we've always done, we're not going to be around in 10, 15, 20 years. So I think for those of us who are in higher ed, especially as I kind of alluded to earlier, kind of at the bottom of the food chain, I
yeah.
think we've got to be smart enough and nimble enough to be responsive to where the market's going for us to hopefully be successful and thrive, in the next 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, and it's actually a topic for another discussion as well. And
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you back in a future episode to discuss some of these wide ranging topics that we've covered here as well. So, where can people find you and find information on HCU?
Yep. I mean, obviously, we're at HC dot as in Houston Christian, but I'm on LinkedIn. Love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll continue the conversation there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, James. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.